And we're going to move on now to the next organism, which is Brucella. Brucella is also fairly low yield for step 1 of the USMLE. Okay, the reason we're mentioning it is if you look down here at this 4th point under features, it is also a potential biological warfare agent. Okay, now the organism, like we talked about for Francisella, is also zoonotic, which means we get it from other animals. Okay, it's facultative intracellular. You should know what that means by now. I feel like I've said it 10,000 times already, but it induces that granulomatous response. Now, what I want you to pay a little bit of attention to down at the bottom are that each different species of animal has different species of Brucella. So, for example, if you look at Brucella abortus, that's the species that you will commonly isolate from cattle. Brucella melitensis, you will commonly isolate from goats. And Brucella suis, you will commonly isolate from pigs. Okay? So they can get a little bit tricky here, telling you, somebody was exposed to one of these different animals. They may be a large animal vet. They may work in a slaughterhouse or something like that for cattle. And then they'll want to know the specific species of Brucella. Okay, so it's a good idea to know which species go with which animals. Now, as far as distinguishing features, again, not much that stands out. It's facultative intracellular. All right, and just like with Francisella, culture is hazardous. So with Francisella and with Brucella, this is something that the lab generally gets alerted. Hey, we suspect one of these organisms, so the lab workers can take precaution. And for that very same reason, it makes those agents very good agents of biological warfare. Why? Not because you're going to kill mass numbers of people, okay? But you're going to make them very sick very quickly. So something like this wouldn't be something, we're going to get a crop dusting plane and release Brucella on a large city. This is going to be something that they would use on like the front lines in the middle of a war, okay? Because it's going to wipe out the troops because they're going to get acutely ill. They're not going to be able to fight, all right? So biological warfare has got some different meanings depending on the species. The reservoirs we talked about is domestic livestock. Transmission is usually through unpasteurized dairy or direct contact with one of the animals that we talked about. As far as highest number of cases for Brucella, California and Texas have a higher incidence of brucellosis, and it's often associated with travel down to Mexico, okay? But you'll definitely, if you're practicing in one of those areas, you'll probably see cases of Brucella. Pathogenesis, we're going to go again with the fact that it's facultative intracellular, keeping in mind this is a gram-negative rod, okay? So with a gram-negative rod, we're always going to worry about endotoxin. Now the disease, I really kind of like the disease here. I got to be honest. The disease is called undulant fever, all right? So it undulates, goes up and down, rises and falls, all right? A lot of the time the fever rises in the evenings. It's okay during the day, so it kind of goes up and down. Now, flu-like symptoms. Wow, that tells us a lot, doesn't it? Somebody presents with flu-like illness. Wow. Are you going to know that's Brucella probably? Well, probably not. Maybe if they told you about coming in contact with one of those animals, you might put 2 and 2 together. But the best feature of Brucella is the profuse sweating. I'm not talking about some stains under the pits here. I am talking about massive sweating from head to toe. That is profuse sweating, okay? Now, hepatomegaly, again, not going to set it apart from other diseases. We can see that with other bacterial, viral, parasitic infections, but profuse sweating, I want you to remember that, okay? Now, another form of the disease can be a little bit milder, but it's a result of incomplete treatment. They're not going to probably ask you about that, okay? Again, this is something that causes acute illness. We're going to worry about the acute disease, wiping out probably a front line of soldier if we're using it for biological warfare. In a farmer, in a vet, a slaughterhouse worker, in those symptoms with the profuse sweating, you should start to make the connection, okay, to Brucella. There's also a chronic form of the disease, okay? It's associated more specifically with Brucella melitensis. You'll see it in people that have probably been exposed for long periods of time, veterinarians, for example, actually laboratory workers. Where I went to graduate school, we actually had a lab, Brucella lab, and there was actually a postdoctoral fellow there that got Brucella, okay? And if you look at this third bullet point here, you'll see that there are cyclical bouts of depression and sweating, okay? So this particular postdoc went on a trip. Again, he had chronic Brucella. He was all confused as to where he was. They found him in a corner crying, and what else was he doing? He was sweating profusely, all right? So you don't want to forget the profuse sweating with Brucella, okay? Now, diagnosis, the culture here is hazardous. They're really probably not going to say much for diagnosis. You can do serology, but again, this is going to be a question that is geared more towards you understanding it's zoonotic, its potential use for biowarfare, okay? So culture here and diagnostic tools are not going to be as important here. Treatment is going to vary depending on who's affected. Adults are going to be given the drug of choice, rifampin and doxycycline, for a minimum of 6 weeks. Remember, it's facultative intracellular. That usually can prolong the treatment. All right. In children, we may use rifampin and cotrimoxazole, all right, for children. So a little bit different. As far as prevention for Brucella, we can vaccinate cattle, which we do. High-risk humans, who would that be? Large animal vets, slaughterhouse workers, military. And those are going to be the high-risk humans. How else can we help prevent Brucella? Is we can pasteurize milk and juices, in particular goat milk. So that would speak to Brucella melitensis.